I had the chance to watch the first half of your video on Standard Oil taxation and healthcare. I really couldn't sit through more than 10 minutes of it. The arguments contained within are juvenile, ill thought out, filled with vitriol, and really wasn't worth my time watching, but I guess I'll set you straight on a few issues. The first being that antitrust legislation was created because established business interests did not want to compete with trusts. So the problem, and if you read the congressional records, they mentioned this in the debates, that the problem is, the problem they had was that they're being outcompeted by these trusts. They were using the railroads to ship products places. They can offer lower prices, and the guys who had been doing well before, well, they couldn't compete on the market, so they thought they'd use the power of the state to shut these guys down. And that's the history of every antitrust action in the United States. You look at Microsoft, people couldn't compete, so they attacked them on the antitrust front. Basically, there's no need for antitrust. So there's nothing wrong with corporations growing large, nothing wrong with a company having a lot of market share. You're wrong when you say that libertarians and anarchists think that monopolies can't occur on the free market. We do, especially with your very loose definition of monopoly. And of course, there's competing definitions of monopoly. I take the opinion, I don't really give a fuck. I think that the term is loaded and pejorative. I think that it doesn't matter if somebody's got a lot of market share or not, so long as there's no violence or coercion involved. Monopolies, if you mean like something with 70% market share, for example, common sort of definition, monopolies can occur on the free market. It's just not a problem. They become a monopoly because they're out competing everybody, offering lower prices, and I don't see what the big deal with that is. Now, and these aren't the sort of harmful monopolies where you get lower quality and higher price, like the government, but these are monopolies that occur because of competition, lower prices, higher quality. Well, yeah, we're all going to buy from the guy that does things better. Why should we buy from the guy that can't compete, the guy that doesn't sell? I mean, you want me to buy your stuff? Well, have higher quality than the competition or lower prices. So you then present a false dichotomy. Should we A, accept that government steals and that's okay, or B, that insurance companies should just fraudulently offer insurance that they're not going to pay out? Well, no, I condemn both of these things. I think that if somebody pays insurance, in good faith, and they're not cheating the system, they're not hiding a pre-existing condition or something like that, I think that absolutely they're entitled to their payout. Now you mentioned if it was against something in the contract, well, that's another story, and let's look at it case by case. But I think it's wrong for the government to use the threat of coercion to get me to give them money, and I think it's wrong for insurance companies to commit fraud. But at least you can cancel an insurance policy. I can't cancel my taxes. And you say that you touch on very briefly an argument for why you need to socialize healthcare is because it's not optional. Well, food and shelter aren't optional, but we haven't socialized that, and people aren't starving, people are homeless, but that's because of government intervention in the market, because a lot of affordable housing options for very poor people are deemed unhospitable. So instead, these people live in shelters or on the street, which is much worse than living in a shitty shack. So you make the tired old canard that anarchy means chaos or lawlessness, and of course it doesn't. And the government can't protect you against violence, against murder. The best they can do is maybe catch the guy afterwards. I mean, the government, if somebody jumps you on the street, the government's not there to jump in and protect you, right? So unless you've got a totalitarian state with police presence everywhere, you're pretty much fucked if somebody wants to kill you, right? And the only real defense is being able to defend yourself, and that doesn't matter what sort of society you're living in. And you say that without the government, everybody would be killing each other, there'd be gangs all over the place, and I think this is Ayn Rand's argument too. Well, maybe you're so savaged and deranged that you can't wait to murder people, and it's only, the threat of government reprisal that makes you a good person. But that's not me. That's not everybody I've ever met or talked to. We're all good people. So I don't know where you get this idea that we're all bloodthirsty maniacs that want to kill each other. I'm glad I didn't grow up in your family. Let's see here. I took some notes. I guess I already covered all this. Who will build the roads? Classic question. Yes, private industry will build the roads. You make an argument against profit, but the problem is, well, that's an argument against every single industry being controlled by free enterprise. So that's an argument for total communism. If the profit motive is so terrible, then how can we have it in food or housing or the automobile industry or anything, right? So, well, we've tried total communism, and guess what happened? Tens of millions of people ended up in slave labor camps, so probably not a great idea. Then you say that free enterprise always takes shortcuts. Well, every year, 40,000 Americans die driving on the roads. So it looks like there's already been some shortcuts taken. And I don't think that you understand how corporations make money, probably because you've never had a job. But it's not by making shortcuts, by cutting on quality. It's by outcompeting their opponents in quality and price. Government, on the other hand, has no competition, and they take shortcuts all the time. Plus, it's just brutally inefficient. Anybody who's ever seen city workers standing around eating a pizza while one guy digs understands how brutally inefficient government can be when there's no competition. So it's also important to understand that police in a libertarian society would be nothing like police in our society today. Right now, we in society are at war with police. Police are at war with us. They oppress us. They use violence against us. They target us. They harass us. I myself have been the victim of false arrest countless times, guilty simply of contempt of cop. So the vast majority of people who run afoul with the law are not criminals in any meaningful sense of the word. They're guilty of nonviolent drug offenses, contempt of cop, driving while black, what have you. And a libertarian legal system would be focused entirely on restitution for the victim, not on punishing or rehabilitating people. So we would be able to cut costs in policing in the sense that 90% of what the justice system does is not necessary. We don't need prisons. We don't need to have millions of people locked behind bars. If there's harm done to someone, the person who harmed the most must make it right, financial restitution, or suffer severe consequences. Involuntary servitude, maiming. If they had maimed somebody, maybe corporal punishment. Details could be discussed. But the modern police surveillance prison state needs to be cut back and reduced desperately. So absolutely, we need to cut back on police, on prisons, on the tools the state uses to the literal violence that backs up the threat of violence implicit in every state action. So companies do not compete by cutting corners. Touched on this already. They compete by raising quality and lowering prices. Monopolies lead to lower quality and higher prices. The state monopolizes every industry it competes in through the power of coercive taxation. Unless you're super rich, you can't afford to A, pay for a government school, and then B, pay for a private school for your child. And that's true for every industry. And if you don't understand even basic economics, it is foolish and irresponsible to hold opinions on this subject. So, read Economics in One Lesson by Hazlitt and get back to us. The example of a fire department letting a house burn was an example of government neglect and malfeasance. That wasn't a free market fire department. That was the government. You can't blame the market for the things the government does. You can't blame the market for the war in Iraq, for intellectual property rights, meaning that children in Africa can't get AIDS medicine. You can't blame the market for the government. This is the oldest trick in the statist book, is that every time the government does something evil, they blame it on the market. And it's just ridiculous. It's a tired old canard, and I for one, will not stand for it. If somebody was in the home and they died, it would be just another death that the government could have prevented or caused. Government's very callous. They murder countless people every year. More people have been murdered by government than any other organization, and it's not even close, right? And you say that government's non-profit, that government's not in the business of making money. Well, that's bullshit. Government is very much in the business of making money. Why do you think they steal, in my country, hundreds of billions of dollars every year? Because they're selfless? Because they're so caring? They just have to take our money for our own good? I mean, anyway, I couldn't watch the rest of your video. It was so below the par. And the bar's set pretty low by statists to begin with, but I mean, your arguments are just so juvenile. It's tough to believe you actually made that video. So hopefully you learned something from this. I'm sure you didn't. You probably didn't even watch it, but I had to let you know anyway why you were wrong on so many issues.